So our theme for the month of May is Spiritual Living Through Creativity, and the talk today title is Leap. So it seems like we're talking about leaping. It seems like we're talking about creativity, but really what we're talking about is love. I was trying to figure out a way to work that in there. Because I read a quote today, this past week, that really hit me, and it's what I really wanted to talk about. We're going to talk about leaping, too. It was a quote by Babaji, and from India, there's many Babajis. So this particular Babaji is the spiritual leader of Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda's lineage. And he said, he was naming different spiritual teachers and leaders throughout India. And he said, if you want to know wisdom, you can look up Sri Yukteswaraji. And if you want to know about joy and pure bliss, know Vivekananda. So he's going through these qualities and the teachers that really anchor these qualities. He said, but if you want to change the world, you got to know love. And I really resonated with that. I've talked before, sometimes with many of the spiritual practices, I can get to a place of incredible peace or incredible joy. And what I find with all of those qualities is that there's a beingness to them that's so delightful, but it doesn't necessarily push me out to want to expand beyond my borders. I can just sit peacefully in meditation and be in bliss. There's something about this quality of love that I think it's not just the vastness of it. When we're in joy or in peace, we're in this transcendent state. But love to me is a quality that comes down into form and fills the entire human experience. That's when we're in that place of love. And then there's this quality that the more love we feel, there's a push outward to reach out towards others, to lift up other people, to transform the world in which we are, to make it better. That there's something, an activating energy about love that I don't feel with a lot of the other qualities. I love those other qualities, but I don't necessarily I feel I need to act on them. But with love, there's something about it that wants me to reach out and connect with other people. And this is not a love that is sterile, that is sort of puritanical. To be loving, you have to be this perfect, pure person who never makes mistakes and does everything right and has a very clear idea of what love looks like. I think of, I was listening to a speech that Lin-Manuel Miranda gave, the writer of Hamilton, he gave to University of Pennsylvania last year, not this year, but last year's graduation. And he was telling this story of when he was in his 20s. And he was in college with his girlfriend, and she had been his girlfriend since high school. It was his high school sweetheart. And she had taken a year abroad, and he had stayed in school. And during that year, he had changed a lot. A lot of changes happened. So she came back after the year, and he said, I was excited to see her, but at the same time, I had this nervousness. And I also noticed that I had this incredible pain in my back, and I was always cracking it because it hurt so much. So my mom sent me to a back doctor. And the back doctor said, there's nothing wrong with your back after checking him. And he said, is there something difficult going on in your life? Because what's happening is you're cracking it because it's a nervous tic. It's become a nervous thing that you do. He said, is there something bothering you? And he burst out crying, and he said, talking about his girlfriend, and it doesn't feel right anymore, but his view is that he was a good guy. And good guys don't leave their girlfriends. They don't break up with their girlfriends. They stay with it. And he didn't know how to handle it. And the back doctor told him, well, if you think of someone like Verdi, who was a composer of operas, that he wrote his best operas after his wife and 2 children died within a few short years of a disease. That the most creativity came through feeling into those painful experiences and moving on the other side of them. He said, if you want to be an artist, and in our case, creatively expressing, we can't detach or avoid pain. That in fact, by going through and feeling it is when the creativity and the new life starts to happen. So Lin-Manuel Miranda went home and he broke up with his girlfriend that evening. And that set him on another path, and it set her on another path. What I love about the story is that a year later she she had been friends with somebody, they started dating, and all these years later they're married with 2 great kids. And he said, I wasn't the big breakup story of her life. I was the obstacle to her great love story. As he stepped through and felt into his own heart, when he was true to the love that was in him, that didn't have the prescribed ideas of how love is supposed to look like. Love always stays, love never leaves. When he allowed himself a new version, a new story of himself, and stepped into that following his heart, it not only served his highest good, it served her highest good. That there's only one power and one presence. My favorite saying is, one in God is a majority. When we're acting from love, and we know there's only love, there's no opposite of love, there's no other love, and we're responding to the love in our heart, that's going to be the highest good for all the people involved. We don't always know how that's going to look. It's the uncertainty that we heard about in the reading and in our song. And this gets to the idea of leap. The series of talks for the month of May is based on a book by David and Tom Kelly called Creative Confidence. So I had read this chapter called Leap, but I happened to also then look up just leap of faith. I just wanted to see, and I didn't know, maybe you already knew, the expression leap of faith comes from the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. And it's actually not leap of faith, it's leap to faith. And it's leap by faith, so it's by faith to faith. And what he explains, which I love, this is where quantum leap comes from. I'm looking for you. The idea is of the leap that he was speaking of is that you start from one state and you get to another, and there's actually no bridge. And that if you're waiting for that bridge, you're never going to cross it. That on these creative journeys, on these creative leaps, you just have to leap without knowing where you're leaping to. You don't know where you're going, and it's not a necessary linear path. I experienced that when I was right after acting school. I was still in the LA area. I didn't know what to do next. And I was just sort of re-examining everything. And up until then, I just found a New Thought church, my very first New Thought church, but I didn't think anything of it because that wasn't the original reason why I was there. And as many of you know, I've had mystical experiences prior to this. And you would think mystical experiences would be sort of a slam dunk, now I know God is real. But I also come from a family that was agnostic and atheist and very articulate. So I was raised in a very high educational system where it was articulated well why there was no God. So basically throughout most of my life growing up, I had this battle going inside of me between my head and my heart. My heart had these one belief and experiences, and my head had this whole other dialogue going on. And I was never at peace. It was never something I could be at peace with. So I was always reading. I was Institute of Noetic Sciences. I read their quarterlies from front to back. I read Deepak Chopra. Anything that was rationally trying to make sense of the spiritual piece. And there was this moment, and I remember it's what you know those moments in Monrovia. And I was just thinking, I just don't like this world. Doesn't seem like a world I want to live in. It's just very harsh. Cold, you have to be strong, you have to be tough, you have to be aggressive, all this stuff. Like, that's just not a world I want to participate in. And I had this whole thing, is there a God? Is there really a God? I mean, I have had these experiences, but is that true? And, then all these thoughts come in, counteracting it. And there became that moment, and it wasn't based on anything. I just made a choice in my head. I said, you know what? I may not rationally be able to prove this. I can't rationally prove whether there's a God or not. But my heart knows. Even if my mind doesn't know, my heart does. And I'm just going to I'm done. I'm done with the battle. I'm just accepting there's a God. I'm done. I made the leap. I went from one state to constant battling to, I believe, this is my life. I live my life knowing that there's a God. I cannot mentally prove it. And actually, Kierkegaard differentiated between belief and faith. Belief was something that you can have evidence for. Faith is when you leap and you can't get the evidence. And so he was actually talking about Christianity. He was a Lutheran. And he said there's no way you can, through just pure rational thought, get to a place of God, because you can't prove God. So you make this quantum leap. And that's exactly what happened. What's so interesting about both Kierkegaard and this book, creative confidence. And I don't know, these are people who, Tom and David Kelly created a design school in Stanford, and they're talking about creativity in terms of creating designs and new possibilities externally. But what's interesting is they both are saying the same thing, which is you can't just leap and then not do anything. You have to move. Action follows the leap. And you don't always know what that action is, but you've got to do something. So both of them talk about you can't just sit around and reflect on it too much or think too much. You just got to keep moving. Once you've made that leap, and because this is all in retrospect, I thought when I made that leap, it was right after that, soon after that I realized, I am really accepting my life. I really love God, that this is real. And then there was this New Thought Church, and look, they have classes there. You know what? I think this is really where I want my life to go. And I just started giving myself, walking in that direction, started taking classes, following the leap. Now, what the Kellys say in the School of Design is sometimes you don't know what those next steps are. Actually, a lot of the times it's the unknown. So what they said, which is fascinating, is quantity is actually better than quality. Do as many things as you possibly can. You make this leap. You don't know this new state that you're in. It's a totally new area. So you try this and you try that. And what they found, they took this, they used an experiment where someone said, okay, here's one design. Spend all day making this design good. And then they had another group say, go for quantity. Just make as many possible different designs and just see how many you can get out. Just go for numbers. See how many you can get out. And what they found over and over was that the people who did the quantity actually came out with the best quality too, the best design. That what happens when we get so focused on wanting to know the right answer, when we leap, that's when we want to control sometimes because we're in the unknown. And so we go for perfectionism. And so we're trying to do everything just right and not make the wrong choices because we're trying to control this new world that we're in. And what they find is the more open we are, the more available we are. And this has pretty been consistent theme all month, hasn't it, about creativity, about being open, being willing, saying yes. That when you make that leap, the more choices that we make, we'll have a lot of failures. We hear all of these stories about the failures. Thomas Edison, how many 100 inventions, or before he, the Lincoln. I mean, it's just my mind's going with all the stories of tons of failures that lead to success. So we just go. When we make that leap, we just go. But what makes that leap possible, I think, is when we're coming from love. Or I think as we're on the spiritual journey as conscious beings, we don't want to just leap randomly. We're leaping because we're following something in our heart that wants to make the world a better place. There is an integrity in our heart that we need to follow. There's a couple stories. Tolstoy, who had read Kierkegaard, he became an atheist when he was 12. And often with philosophers, this is true, because they're thinking about your mind can only go so far. And then he had to make his leap into Christianity 38 years later. And he said when he did, what followed, he said, I couldn't just make the leap and say I'm a Christian now. I had to follow it with action. So he freed his serfs. He started writing books for their level to teach them how to read. He gave them land so they could live. He didn't just free them and say, okay, you're on your own now. He gave them a way to read and to survive with the land. It was incredible. And he said that the leap is followed by action, by follow-through. And this is the creativity, and this is the love. That when we make that leap from our hearts, there's something that follows that says we want to make a world a better place for ourselves and for other people. And sometimes, like I said, it's not immediately obvious. So the second story that Lin-Manuel Miranda shared, which I really loved, was he wanted to write musicals. He had written his first musical, I don't know if you know, is Into the Heights. And he had written it while he was in college. And he really wanted to get into the theater scene in New York and get it up on Broadway, obviously. And he met this great composer, Tommy Kail, and they're working on it. And they meet this big-time investor, loads of money, can get the play up. So they're going through the play, and the investor says, well, I really like this musical. I love the music, I like the story, I like the idea. There's this one character, though, it's not high stakes enough for her. And so he wants to add things like she gets on drugs or she gets pregnant and these stories. And both Tommy Kail and Lin Miranda are like, no, that's not the story we want to tell. And so they both simultaneously said no, even though what this guy was offering was what their heart's desire, which was to be on Broadway. But their bigger heart desire was to tell the story they wanted to tell. Storytelling that speaks to their heart. And so they continued to work. There were many options. They brought in all these different people. They did change the story a little, not to the way he wanted, but was in integrity with their heart, making it about community. And 10 years later, after this meeting, their musical gets to Broadway. They didn't know that. When they said no to that big-time investor, he didn't know in 10 years this musical was ever going to make it to Broadway. They didn't know it was going to lead to this Hamilton where everybody knows Manuel Miranda's name is. They didn't know any of that. But they followed their heart. And as he was talking, he started tearing up, and he said the greatest joy for him are all the people that come and say, this musical and this particular character who they didn't denigrate by she's got on drugs, or it was sort of a typical someone's idea of perhaps a Latino woman might stereotypes. They wouldn't play to those stereotypes. And all the people who came and said, thank you so much. Her story has fed me. It's got me through the hardest times in my life. I was the first person in my family to go through college. And he said, our stories, when we stick to them, serve other people. When we follow and make that leap, even though we don't know where it's going, but we trust our heart. We trust our heart. And that's what I believe creativity is all about. So we want to make the leap. We don't want to think too much once we've made the leap. And we want to make the leap usually when we feel uncomfortable, when things aren't going well. The other thing that the Kellys say is that a lot of the designs that people come up with in their class come from empathy. It's not always from our own hurt. It's from recognizing, and it can be all levels. This just isn't working very well for somebody else. And he gave all these stories, which I thought were incredible, of people who just noticed something that wasn't working well. They didn't get paid for it. It wasn't their job. It wasn't their stuff, but they saw it wasn't working for people. So someone couldn't let one of their friends, who was an elder person, would be at the bus stop, and they never knew when the bus was coming. And so she told this, one of the men in design class, and he said, and the Kellys, who are writing the book, said, now, if the transit system had been told this, they'd say, okay, get somebody on it to fix this in the next 2 or 3 months. This person said, I'll have it fixed by the end of the day. He's not even in the transit system. He just happened to care about this person, this elder person sitting at bus stops, not knowing when the buses came, and he created some sort of app that they could figure out when the bus was coming, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, so they knew when it was coming. And the Kellys said they checked it out 3 years later, and it was still working if you knew how to get onto it. And he was using that as an example, that empathy of that willingness to support and help other people. So when I say that creativity and making this leap is about the heart, it's not just about our heart. It's about expanding and feeling other people and saying, I thought it was just, it was just so interesting in his book. He said, if you see something that's not working for someone else, use that as an opportunity to say, what can I do to make this better? And believe that you can. There's always the leap is, I have no idea what that's going to look like. Yesterday, Julian and I got stuck in a parking lot, like down a field, and there's only one way in. We didn't realize it till you're in it, and there's just a stream of cars. And I had no idea how we were going to get out, but we prayed, didn't we, Julian? Prayer works. And we were in solution consciousness. And Julian said, I was like ready to just surrender and just go, and Julian said, no, we need to stay here. And these two guys got out of the car, and it was a field of one, all these cars coming this way. These two guys got out of their car, and they got everybody to drive back up the entire field and out onto the road. And then Julian and I just jumped in, and because they got in their cars, because as soon as people were backing up, new cars were coming in, and so we were trapped. So Julian and I just stood out there, and we got all the cars. We just kept shooting. No, you can't come in. So we got all the cars out. And then we got in, and then Julian got out on his own because then more cars came in, and he got all on his own, got people to move back. It was just this willingness to say, we're going to help. We're going to help all the other people, and a willingness to see a possibility even when we got there, we could see no possibility. Being in that solution consciousness. And I love that happened yesterday because it was just as I was reading, I'm like, when does that happen? Ta-da! So I'm going to end with this, a final story. People in the spiritual leadership class know this story. Someone posted a story about Mr. Rogers this past week in relation to the Manchester bombings. And it was a quote. The quote from Mr. Rogers was, when he was a child and he found the world scary, his mother said, when the world looks scary, look for the helpers. The helpers always come out during those times. And, in that Manchester, we saw the helpers. We see it over and over with these. So there was a shooting in Mississippi. It's in Portland. It just seems they're happening so frequently. But the goodness and the helping people come out. And what we seek, do we have faith in humankind? Well, if we make the leap that people are fundamentally good, we'll start seeing that. So this gentleman put this series of tweets last week with that quote from Mr. Rogers. And he said he had gone to University of Pittsburgh. He had really loved Mr. Rogers when he was a child, watching him. And then, of course, he grew past it. And then he was in college, and his dad had just died, and he didn't know what he wanted to do. And obviously, college cost a lot of money, and he felt very lost and depressed. He was just in this deep depression. And he said he's walking by some room where Mr. Rogers was on. And Mr. Rogers says, "What do you do with the mad that you're feeling?" And he said he was just completely riveted and drawn in to listen to Mr. Rogers. Then the next day he's in a building, and as he's going down, Mr. Rogers walks into the elevator, because Mr. Rogers is located in Pittsburgh. And he goes, "Mr. Rogers," and he just told him how much he loved him as a child. And Mr. Rogers goes, "Oh, you were one of my neighbors," because he sings me. "Won't you be my neighbor?" And he said, "Yes." And so Mr. Rogers gave him a big hug. And then as they got out of the elevator, the guy said, "I just reconnected with you yesterday. I saw you on television, and I've been going through a really tough time where I feel very depressed, and my dad died." And so Mr. Rogers clearly was going out the building to go somewhere. He stopped and he sat down, and he said, "Come sit with me. Tell me about what's going on." He lived what he taught. "Tell me, what's upsetting you?" And he just talked. They just sat there and talked with Mr. Rogers. That is find the helpers, that empathetic heart that takes a leap. I'm sure Mr. Rogers had an appointment somewhere where he had to go, but he took a leap of trusting his heart that this young man needed him more than anything else in that moment, and he sat with him. That our creative leaps are not always about creating new designs. It's about opening our heart beyond our comfort zone, opening our heart to other people, hearing what they need and being there present for them. The greatest and most joyful creativity is when we lead from our heart, for ourselves and for other people. So the invitation this week is simple, is to listen to your heart. I believe that there are opportunities every single day when we look for them to take a leap from our heart into a greater expression of love for ourselves. If we haven't been listening to ourselves, as Lynn Miranda wasn't with his girlfriend, he thought it was the wrong thing to do, but our heart, something in us are telling us this isn't right. Take the leap. Be willing to take those leaps that seem so hard. It is into the unknown. But if we trust, because there's not a bridge, they'll never get to the point where you just think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it. It's a leap. I just know. I just know there's the divine presence. I can't prove it to anybody. And I live my whole life in alignment with that at this point. But I had to take the leap first. We had to take a leap yesterday with the cars, that there was going to be a way when we couldn't see a way. Every day there's opportunities to leap for ourselves and for other people when we listen. You with me on that? You're going to take some leaps this week? Maybe today even? It's pure joy when we do. We know when it's right, even when we don't know where it's leading to. We know. Let's pray. And so we feel the love right here and right now. That we don't have to go anywhere to feel this love. That all the love that has ever been We imagine profound love where other spiritual teachers have been walking this planet on this earth. We imagine perhaps great love in the future. But all of that love is right here, right now, in this moment, in our very hearts, in our very being. And that this love is infinitely truthful, it is infinitely wise, it is infinitely all-knowing and beautiful. And that there is only this one love. So there is no separation, there's nothing opposite of this love. That as we align ourselves with this all love that has ever been and ever will be right here and right now, we are in alignment with all life. We are in alignment with every atom and cell of creation. We are in alignment with the wind and the trees. We are in alignment with the desert and the ocean. We are in alignment with all beings on this planet, all life forms, all animals, insects, birds, everything that exists, we are in alignment with when we are in alignment with the love of our heart, the infinite love of the universe, this love that has no boundaries, this love that has no limits, this love that is everywhere present, this love that is infinite in its beingness and yet absolutely intimate as each and every one of us. It knows itself as each and every one of us beyond our wildest imagination. It knows us before we were ever born into this physical body. It knows every story. It knows every thought, every feeling, every experience we have ever had. It knows everything about us, and it is love. And it is love. It is love without condition. It is love, and we are that love. Every single one of us is that love here and now. And I celebrate and I give thanks that all those things that block us from that love, all those buts, maybes, shoulds, coulds, all those things that the separation between us and the always already perfect love are dissolving into the nothingness from which it came. We allow that infinitely powerful love to pour through every atom and cell of our being. We allow it to pour through our mind and our heart. We allow it to pour through our energy body and our causal body. We allow it to pour through every aspect of our financial life, our relationships, our work life, our family life, every aspect of our life, our daily errands, those ordinary tasks. We allow it to pour through us as we watch the community in which we live and we see and feel with love those things that maybe we could support and help. We take leaps beyond our comfort zone in, through, and as this love. We are leaping in love, to love, as love, through love. We are this love in every way, and we allow ourselves to expand in our sharing and our giving and our uplifting. And this is the way we are here and now in this very moment, expanded beings of this yes, of this love that has no end, that has no limit. All the love that we are inside of us has no limit. There's no inside and outside. It becomes one. There is only one. The love in and the love out are one. And the love is just, the loving and the leaping is just within, through, and as this oneness. Greater, expansive expressiveness of this love. We allow those fears to dissolve into the nothingness from which it came. We are the safest when we are in the unknown, for we rely completely on the love that is this universe, that is the source of our very life. And so this love that is healing us even now, this love that cares for us, and we allow it into our heart, we allow it into any places of walls and blocks, we allow it into our relationships and our finances and our work. We allow, and we are healed. We are heaven on earth right now. There is no separation. The transcendent and the immanent are one. The infinite and the finite are one. The absolute and the relative are one. The adult and the child are one. The black and the white are one. The right and the wrong are one. All seeming opposites one. Love is a place that changes the world. Love is what changes us. I am so grateful to know this, to feel it, to be it, as everyone in this room. Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. In deep abiding peace, I joyfully and gratefully let this word be now. And I invite us all to say together as one, and so it is. Amen.